It's Leonardo Milano from UN-OCHA, and he will present on the role of global flood forecast and models for humanitarian action, usability and limitations. Leonardo, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter, and hi, everyone. So just sharing my screen. Can you just confirm that you can see the slides in presentation mode and that you can hear me?
All
okay?
good, Leonardo. You can go on.
Okay, so let's get started. I will actually try to keep the presentation rather short because I think really I would like to have an exchange with you all. So thank you very much. It's really a great pleasure to be able to present some of the work that we are doing at UN-OCHA. UN-OCHA is the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and we are trying in a number of contexts to get ahead of humanitarian crisis by acting in anticipation of floods in different contexts, as you will see, and of course flood forecasting. The input for this what we call anticipatory humanitarian action is the critical element, and it's really the new element. So I'm really pleased actually to talk to this audience today. So what are we trying to achieve? So, well, as you probably know, the humanitarian system is extremely efficient, in delivering assistance, but is, a system that has been mainly reacting to crisis. So usually, humanitarian aid and humanitarian funding is available only after a disaster on the basis on an assessment of humanitarian needs. So where needs are already materialized and can be assessed, priorities are set, and the action plans are defined, and people are receive assistance. Now, the point is that most of the humanitarian crises are not coming out of the blue, and are not events that now with the with the developments on scientific developments and technological developments and so on, we can have risk, we can project the risk of a given crisis, and that's exactly what we are trying to do. So trying to shift the humanitarian response, and instead of triggering anticipatory action, in triggering action on the basis of an assessment, do it on the basis of a risk, a projected risk of humanitarian needs, of a projected impact of a given shock. That's what we call anticipatory action. So the idea being that if we have what we call a trigger for anticipatory action, so basically a signal that would tell us with high enough confidence that a crisis is likely to happen with an expected severe impact on the population, then we can release financing and put in place, start implementing a number of actions that aim at mitigating the overall impact of the crisis. So in this way, and we have already evidence of this, we would be able to spend humanitarian fundings in a much faster way, in a more efficient way. It would be a more dignified way also of assisting the people that we are serving. So you see, the overall impact will be reduced, and we have, based on past experience, already quite good evidence of this. This is not something new, especially in the humanitarian sector. many other organizations have been doing, piloting or implementing this approach for many years. I'm talking about the Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent societies. They have what they call their forecast-based financing programs. FAO, WFP have been pretty active already in the early days, and the START network, to name some of the partners. But of course now what we are trying to do with within the UN system and with the Central Emergency Response Fund of the UN is to do anticipatory action collectively and at scale. And that's really what I would like to to present some of the examples that we have been working on over the past couple of years. So this is where we are currently implementing what we call anticipatory action pilots. So looking at different shocks and looking at different contexts, you see that we have already a number of pilots for floods, in place. With some country offices, we are developing this type of frameworks. Today I would like maybe to talk a little more about a specific example, and I will be discussing the work that we have done in Bangladesh in response of the seasonal floods during the monsoon season. So we actually decided to look at to start with Bangladesh because there was already at the local level capacity. There was from the national authorities already like a system in place that we could build upon. So what we focused on one section of the Jamuna River, and more specifically looking at one specific station that is called Badurabad. What we have done was really like combining information from the global models. In this case, we were using the GLOFAS model that would actually provide longer lead times. I mean, the information then from global models have been complemented with other models developed at the country level. And in this case, we were using the projections from FFWC that is actually also providing updates on with shorter lead times. And this was actually, the first lesson learned. So how do we combine the current tools to really find the right trade-off between the uncertainty that we have and the lead time, and really maximizing the window of opportunity? So what we have done in Bangladesh was to adopt a phased approach, so that we would have, instead of one single trigger, two triggers in this case, one that would be, would activate the framework, even when the uncertainty is, higher, and would only, trigger the actions that need to start well in advance before, the peak of the flooding. And then, as we go, as we get closer to the actual, to the projected event, use all the information that is available to trigger the full response at scale. This was actually the first time that the UN, especially the CERF, that's the Central Emergency Response Fund, was sending money on the basis of a model, on the basis of a risk of an event. It was actually the fastest allocation. So from the moment we actually reached the trigger, 4 hours later, organizations already received the funding necessary to start implementing an action plan that was already established, and also the targeting was clear, so that it was pretty much, implemented in an automatic way. So there was no planning and discussions going on. It was really going directly into implementation. What you see in this timeline, is a comparison of the allocation from SURF in 2020 compared to previous years. So you see that, exactly what I was describing before. Humanitarian funding usually comes, pretty late. You see, it was 35 days later, and, with some cash intervention and, health and animal feed was actually even, even later. Last year, we managed to have the first readiness trigger, actually turned out to be, a good one. And it was 14 days before. That's when organizations got ready. And then when we got the confirmation 5 days before, organizations immediately started implementing the action plan. And they managed to reach 200,000 people with the 5.2 million that were released by SURF up to 3 days before the peak of the flooding. Now, as I was telling you before, from other organizations we have evidence, but now as part of these pilots we also want to build the evidence that this approach is a better way of responding to this type of crisis. And we have done a pretty extensive impact evaluation, so looking at the cost of the response and the outcomes, at different with different lags and so on. And I can send additional information on the details of the different evaluations, but just to give you a sense, compared to previous years, if we look at 2019, the cost per person, if we compare anticipatory action and let's say traditional response, was half. Which means that we can reach more people with the same limited, amount of funding. The fact that we're not acting also during a crisis has also other benefits, and for instance, also on the logistics and the procurement. And we have seen that organizations manage to also optimize the costs, related to anticipatory action. Now, Bangladesh, of course, was the first country where we implemented this. And I would like maybe to give you, and sort of to kick off the discussion, to reflect a bit more on why Bangladesh was a success, and the project in Bangladesh was successful, and what I think are the main challenges now that if we want to scale up this approach. That is definitely the direction we want to go. I guess Bangladesh was a good example, as I said, at the beginning, because there was already capacity at the local level. Organizations were already familiar with the different tools, especially at the local, at the community level. There were already some projects. So the different, NGOs and local partners were already using this type of information. So, they were kind of used to this forecast. So, and the other thing, and that's really like the way we are approaching the development of these pilots, is really like to try as much as possible to bridge the gap. And that's why I'm really, interested in, hearing the discussion today between, the producers. So who's producing the forecast and who's using the forecast. And, before actually start implementing these projects, we have done an assessment, and we have seen that, usually the communication between the two communities is not very effective for many different reasons. It could be because, the end users are not necessarily always involved in the design of the different tools, or the messaging is not clear, or from the end users, perspective, there's a lack or, some sort of resistance when it comes to using, to having technical discussions. So, and in this sense, we really feel that a critical role that is important in, sort of maximizing the impact that all the science that we are developing will have is this, man in between, this sort of technical translator. So someone that is able to understand from organizations on the ground what are the requirements, basically how much time they need, what's the granularity of the information, what are the delays and so on, what's the relevant information, and translate this into technical specifications for the scientists, and doing this back and forth. And that's exactly what my team at at the Center for Humanitarian Data does. So I think this was really like one of the keys for the success of in Bangladesh. Maybe other points just to for discussion. I think especially when we think about, I mean, I'm sure this is not something new, but that's really like my my pitch to this audience. When it comes to using forecasts for humanitarian action specifically, it's important to know as much as possible to have an indication of what is the expected impact of floods. So we have seen that some of the tools are great tools from a scientific point of view, hydrological models providing information on the expected stream flow and so on. When it comes to estimating the impact that this will have on the ground, meaning what's the area that is going to be flooded, how long, for how long, what's the duration, and what's the depth of the water and so on, the information is is patchy and is not always available. But this is really sort of the information that organizations on the ground need. Bangladesh was great.
Leonardo.
Yeah, I'm wrapping up. Bangladesh was great because there was already experience, so we could link the hydrological models to the expected impact. Investing on capacity building, this, especially at the country level, it's top one priority, I think, and that's why again we need to learn from the Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a pretty data-rich context, and if we think about scaling up anticipatory action, one of the main challenges will be applying the same to different contexts. So we have been also exploring, I don't know, similar approaches in South Sudan, Central African Republic, and so on. It gets much more, more challenging in this type of context. And then, of course, the exchange and really understanding the user requirements to sort of inform and prioritize the scientific development. These are some of the points that I wanted to sort of conclude with, and let me with this wrap up my contribution and hearing from the audience. Thank you.